Can I just confirm that you can hear or see me?
Yes, I see your presentation.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. So a little bit about me. I'm a professor at Stanford University. I'm actually British. I moved to the US a few years ago. I started my career as a maths teacher in London schools where there were over 200 languages spoken, many people from the African continent in London. I moved from, first I was at King's College in London, then I moved to Stanford University where I formed UCubed. And UCubed is a website anybody can come to with lots of free resources that is sharing all the ways people can see maths differently, to get rid of maths anxiety and to see maths as a creative and beautiful subject. If you would like to see more of my ideas, these are a couple of books, but I'm going to share with you today the 6 keys that are in Limitless Mind. And the first key is that our brains are constantly changing. Many people think that you're kind of born with a certain brain or not, a maths brain, an art brain. But in fact, that is not true. And every time we learn something, there are 3 things happening in the brain. One possibility is you form a new brain pathway when you first learn something. And the deeper you learn, the stronger that brain pathway becomes. Another possibility is you strengthen a pathway. And the third possibility is you form connections between pathways you already had. That is how your brains are developing mathematical pathways. And you can learn anything at all. There's no limit to what you can learn. Anybody can develop brain pathways at any time. So the second key in my book that I talk about is the importance of times of struggle and making mistakes. Those are actually the best times for your brain. When you find something really difficult, instead of thinking, oh, I'm not a maths person, realize that your brain is developing those very important connections. And we find that it's very freeing when people realize that times of struggle are the best times for the brain. I love, this is an image from James Nottingham, where he talks about the pit of struggle. You have to get into that pit. It's a really important place to be. And teachers I work with get their students to think about this learning pit. When you're going into the pit, you're thinking, oh, I'm so confused, this is hard. But you really need to spend time in the pit and engage in that struggle. The third key really comes from these first 2, and it's about the importance of having a growth mindset, knowing that you can understand anything. We have a lot of evidence that when you change your mindset, your beliefs about yourself, that changes a lot of things in your life. It changes how you learn, also your health, many, many things. And I will just share one study with you. This was a study conducted at Stanford, where they followed over 61,000 people over more than 21 years. And this is what they found, that people who thought they were doing healthy exercise were actually more healthy than people who were doing the same amount of exercise but didn't think they were doing healthy exercise. And the negative thinkers were 71% more likely to die in the follow-up period. So it actually really matters what you believe about yourself. And this is part of why it matters. This was an amazing study that showed that mistakes are really good for your brain, though, when your brain lights up with activity. But if you make a mistake and you have a growth mindset, you believe in yourself, there's a lot more activity, and that is a voltage map of actual brains in the study. So this helps us understand evidence like this, that kids with a growth mindset are on this upward trajectory. Not surprising when you think that every time they make a mistake, their brains are growing and developing more than kids with a fixed mindset. But you can change your mindset at any time. It is a journey. It's not a quick change, a quick switch, but once you become aware of the brain evidence and the power of brain growth and mistakes, you start to live your life differently, and your mindset starts to change. I work with Carol Dweck at Stanford, And she shared her recent thinking about mindset. This is us in a presentation together. And she said that she has realized now that it isn't that we have a fixed or a growth mindset, but that everybody has times of fixed mindset thinking. And what's important is to identify those times and realize when you're going into that thinking. She even recommends giving a name to your fixed mindset. She said that day that when I was with her, that she'd been presenting to a company, and the company leader had shared that he decided to call his fixed mindset Dwayne. And he said, when we're under pressure, I become Dwayne and I get critical and bossy. And somebody in the company said, yes. And when your Dwayne comes out, my Iana comes rushing out and I become stressed and submissive. So I have shared the importance of having a growth mindset. And if you're aware of the importance of struggle and brain change, that is really good. It makes you interact differently. It makes you learn differently. And if you live just one day with what I call a limitless perspective, you will feel it, especially if it's a day when things go wrong. But for learners, this isn't enough. And what I want to share with you today is the importance of interacting with knowledge differently. So the fourth key in my book talks about the importance of engaging with content like maths in lots of different ways. And we know from neuroscience that when you work on a maths problem, there are 5 different areas of the brain that light up. 2 of them are visual pathways. And as well, it's really important to think visually about mathematics. It's also really important to connect those different pathways in the brain. And when we see content in different ways, as numbers, words, or we move with maths, or we build, that causes those really important brain connections. So I want to illustrate this with you now. So think for a moment for yourself, without writing anything down, about the answer to 18 times 5. And I'm going to give you a moment, just probably too short time to think about that, and then I'm going to talk with you about it. So you don't have to have solved the question, but my question for you is, how did you think about it? Many people think about it like this. They line up the numbers and they perform an algorithm. 5 times 8, they carry the 4. And that's actually not the most efficient thing to do when you're thinking in your mind without pen and paper. So let's look at some other approaches. Some people think, well, I'll just work out 20 times 5 and take off 2 5s. And visually, we might represent this like that. Some people think, I'll work out 10 times 5 and 8 times 5. Some people think, I'll think about 2 9 times 5s. And some people think about multiples of 18. And then my favorite, some people think, well, 18 times 5 is the same as 9 times 10. And that would be represented in this way. So right here, we're thinking visually about maths. We're also thinking numerically. And because we're thinking in those different ways, that causes these important brain connections. So the 5th key in my book is about the importance of thinking deeply and flexibly instead of quickly. We just thought flexibly about 18 times 5. It turns out that speed and trying to be quick with maths is the enemy of deep and flexible thinking. And actually being fast is not important in mathematics, although a lot of people think it is. I love this new book written by a physicist. And the author talks about how there are 2 forms of knowledge. One, algorithmic, rational thinking, very much valued in schools. But there's another form of knowledge, flexible, creative, what he calls elastic thinking. And he talks about how this algorithmic thinking is worshipped in Western society, but really it's a low-level God. And the high-level God is this flexible, creative thinking. He also points out that the algorithmic thinking can be performed by a computer better and faster than anybody here today. But that creative, flexible thinking is really uniquely possible by the human brain, and the human brain can perform that thinking. We should be encouraging that thinking in our young people and in our schools. So the final key I share in the book is about the importance of connecting and collaborating. You may have heard of the PISA tests. They're tests that are given to students in lots of different countries. And it was found in 2012 that boys outperform girls in that traditional test in 38 countries. But when they factored in anxiety, they found achievement differences disappeared. The girls were actually more anxious than the boys about taking this pencil and paper test. But that same year, they gave a different test, which they called collaborative problem solving. And in this test, the students worked with a computer agent solving a complex problem. The computer agent solved some, and then the person also solved some of the problem together. And in that test, there were some very interesting results. First of all, girls outperform boys in all 51 countries. Also, there were no significant differences between advantaged and disadvantaged students. So it shows us that when we collaborate and when we connect ideas, inequities can disappear. And actually connecting, collaborating with an idea is very important for our brains and for mathematics. So just before I move to a time of questions, I wanted to share that our latest initiative at Stanford and UCubed is about bringing data science more centrally into education. So why do we care about this new field that's called data science? Well, it turns out that our world is filled with data. And in fact, huge amounts of the data in the world now have all come about in the last few years. It's really a new time for our world. And we are working to make students be aware that if you are able to see and work with data, you'll be very powerful in our world right now. We're also helping particularly students here understand, or students everywhere, that every time they interact online, they're giving away some of their data. They should understand that too. So data science is not quite the same as statistics. It uses statistics, but instead of learning a set of methods, students are given real and complex data sets, and they ask questions of their data. So it's a much more flexible subject, more open. It's very cross-curricular. You can think about data in lots of different subjects and fields, not just maths, although it's important in maths. And I love that the field of data science is open to everybody. Maths has been presented over the years in a very exclusive way, but data science is saying anybody can become a data scientist, and 7 of the top jobs at the moment involve data science. So it turns out I've been working with the Steve Levitt and his group at the University of Chicago. We've been collecting surveys on what maths do people actually use in their lives. And this shows you that the maths that we often teach in school, algebra, geometry, actually many people said they never use that in their daily life, but data, visualizing data, working with spreadsheets is something that a lot of people are using now. So I think we really need to update the school curriculum. In February of this past year, I invited top mathematicians, data scientists, educators, policymakers to come to Stanford for us all to think about how do we solve this and bring data science into education. And I want to play you a short video that Stanford made as a press release about this idea.
We know that the mathematics curriculum that's currently in schools, the maths that students are learning, is really outdated. The world has changed dramatically in recent years, yet our maths curriculum has stayed the same. And in fact, the sequence of high school courses that are in the US, algebra, geometry, was actually created in the 1800s, which is kind of mind-blowing. So we really urgently need to teach kids the maths they're actually going to use in their lives and work and courses.
I believe data science really opens up, both within math classes, but more broadly within education, ways for children to become the discoverers of knowledge as opposed to the recipients of the brilliance of past generations. So at a very practical level, data science is useful because data science is increasingly becoming part of what you do.
We really need to get mathematicians at the table if we're going to change high school maths. So it started off with inviting about 10 mathematicians to come today at Stanford. We ended up having data scientists, there are high school teachers, and policymakers are here, people from the universities are here. So we've really brought together those people that we think can make this movement happen.
This is a rare opportunity to gather with experts, other educators, researchers to discuss what is it going to really take to make data science education accessible and valuable for students.
It's a very exciting group that's been put together, and I think it shows tremendous promise for being able to actually spearhead a change. This change will happen. I think the opportunity is to make it happen in the best way possible, enfranchising the largest number of people as we go.
I believe that all of us need to know how to look at data, how to understand data, and to have the expertise to work in the modern economy. So much of every person's job in the future is going to involve some aspect of data, as we've seen data explode in terms of how it's being collected and how it's being used. I really think this is such an incredible opportunity to bring people together to make this change in the education system.
This really seems to have the potential to change the maths in school, change it from a very procedural, meaningless subject for most kids into something that they can see is useful in the world and feel empowered to use that mathematics in the world.
So we at our center at UCubed are sharing lots of different resources, data science lessons, a picture book, a new online class that people can take free. These are some of the visuals people submitted at the end of the online class. So I'm going to stop here and I would like to open it up for questions for however long we have.
All right. So now we're going to start the question phase, and we already have a question from Bayu, who says, I feel that the pinnacle of my thinking, creativity oftentimes happen when or where we didn't feel it before. Not infrequently, new ideas emerge precisely when we are in the bathroom. Why is that?
That's a great question. Yes, they've actually found that people have their most creative ideas when they stop working and stop thinking about work. When they go for a walk, that's been found to enable people to have very creative ideas. I often have my best ideas actually when I'm asleep. So I think they have also found that, knowledge can inhibit creativity. When people are thinking, I have to use this knowledge I've learned, that shuts down part of our most creative part of the brain. So great question. Yes, getting away from thinking about work is the way to unleash that creativity.
Thank you for that answer. I have another question, and that is, how can we encourage more underrepresented students like girls to pursue math and data science?
Great question again. Yes, I'm really passionate about opening up both maths and data science for people who are often shut out. That includes girls, often students of color. We have a lot of systems, particularly in the US, to keep out students, which I'm really hoping to change. So I do find that when we present maths differently as this visual, creative, open subject, that many more students come in to mathematics and work on it. We're already finding that data science, which is more exploratory and visual, is attracting a much more equal set of kids. Many more girls are taking it, people of color are taking it. So I'm very hopeful that data science, as it gets rolled out, will be very open and equitable in the students involved. I also hope that for maths, and we're working on that.
Thank you so much for that answer. Our next question is from Nyaradzo, and who says, what pushes you to wake up and do the things you do every day?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that really motivates me to keep going with our work is the number of people I meet who tell me that they've had bad maths experiences, that they grew up thinking they weren't a maths person, that somebody told them they couldn't be successful. Sometimes they've been given the message that you have to be fast, and that's made them turn away. All of these ideas are myths. The idea you have to be fast is a myth, or that you can only learn so much, that's a myth. We can all learn anything. So because particularly mathematics has associated with so many bad experiences for people, that really makes me passionate to get out and change the conversation and to have people be aware of this new knowledge from neuroscience, from learning, that anybody can be successful.
That's such a great response. Our next question is from Shinda, and who says, when is the most appropriate time to maximize thinking?
Well, one of the things the neuroscience tells us is that times of struggle are the times when your brain is growing the most and is the best time for your brain. They've studied people actually who've become very successful, and they've found that they all engage in what they call this zone where they're finding work really difficult and making mistakes, but then moving on from those, making more mistakes, moving on, making more mistakes. And, you know, this is called this sort of zone where you're at the edge of your thinking, where you're pushing yourself to do something difficult. So it's not the best time to actually get, say, a page of maths questions and get them all correct. That seems good, but isn't pushing our brain into this really important zone where you're at the edge of your understanding. That's where you want to be to really maximize what you can learn.
Great response. I have another question, which is, schools today normally are focusing on, especially AP classes still, our AP math classes are focused on memorization of the topic and drilling a lot of problems and drilling lots of tests. And how can we make this, our math curriculum, more project learning based?
Yeah, that's so important. And I'm glad you mentioned things like the AP tests, because as long as we have these rigid tests, teachers are going to keep emphasizing that kind of memorization approach. Memorization as a learning approach is not a good one. Actually, with the PISA team, we analyzed 13 million student responses on the PISA tests and found that people who take a memorization approach were the lowest achievers in every country in the world. So these tests kind of push people into thinking that memorization is good and push teachers into that, going fast and having kids just remember. So I'm glad, you raised things like the testing. We have to change that. And we try and communicate to policymakers and to others that the tests are part of the problem. I love that Google, as a company a couple of years ago, said they are no longer going to pay attention to any of those standardized tests because they have zero predictability for who is a good worker. There are lots of movements. Stanford has stopped taking the graduate admissions test that's very speed-based. Over 1,000 colleges across the US are no longer taking the SAT. They're not using it. So, we're at a good time. People are becoming more aware. This is not the kind of thinking that we should be valuing. So let's see what happens over the next few years.
Yeah, that sounds like a great answer. Since we're not having more questions, I'd really like to thank you so much, Dr. Jo Boaler, for such a motivating presentation. And thank you, students, for joining this amazing talk. And I've learned so much through your talk. And thank you so much to Mr. Knowledge Shakundi for organizing this festival. Thank you, everyone. And if you have more questions, you can either post them down on the chat and we can send them to Dr. Jo Boaler. Thank you, everyone. Bye.